I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting of today, April 3rd. I'd like to ask everybody in the audience to please turn your phones off so they don't interrupt our program. We will start tonight with the public hearing agenda. Commissioner Tallman, roll call please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Schneider is excused. Eichenberry?
Here.
Johnson? Tallman here. Ingram?
Present.
Hepner?
Here.
Bransgard?
Here.
Reinhardt?
Here.
Manus?
Here.
Garrington's excused. And Stelk? Here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. First item of business is case number REZ 22-03 is a request of the City of Davenport on behalf of VSM Holdings LLC to rezone the west 100 feet of Lot 2 of Pheasant Ridge First Edition from R2 Single Family Residential District to C3 General Commercial District. Matt?
So the proposed rezoning request, the subject property is outlined in yellow on the map on the left. It's in total about 7.4 acres of land. It's just west of Elmore Avenue, north of the AT&T call center, and Costco's over there to the west. And then you have the Walmart shopping center on the other side of Elmore. And then it's bound by Pheasant Creek just to the north. However, the portion of land that we're talking about for this rezoning is the west approximately 100 feet of property that runs the entire west lot line. So this property is currently split zone between C3, which is General Commercial District, and that's consistent with the property along Elmore Avenue as well as 53rd Street. And then that strip of land on the west is zoned R2, which is a single family residential district. That's consistent with the property just to the west as well as the abutting single family subdivision. So a little bit of history on this site and why the request is coming before you today. So in 2018, the property owner petitioned to rezone the property to a planned unit development district. So that took place in 2018, and that rezoned the entirety of the 7.4 acres of land under that PDD category. However, in 2019, when the city did their comprehensive zoning map update, there was a mapping mistake that took place in terms of the delineation between that residential portion as well as the commercial portion. So since the city map was incorrectly shown, that overwrote that 2018 rezoning. So the city is being the petitioner on this request to correct that error that took place with the new mapping in 2019. So map on the right shows the future land use map. This area along Elmore Avenue is regional commercial, and then you get the residential general further beyond the subject property to the west. So the R2 district, which this strip of land is currently zoned, is really meant to accommodate lower density single family neighborhoods. And then that C3 general commercial district, which abuts Elmore, is meant for the higher intensity commercial developments, serving both a local as well as a regional market. So really just by having this portion of land rezoned to C3 commercial puts the entirety of the site under one zoning classification and will help facilitate the development of this property. So in terms of public input, notices were sent to abutting property owners within 200 feet, notifying them of tonight's public hearing, as well as a notice being published in the Quad City Times. And to date, staff have not received any phone calls or written comments. So a formal staff recommendation will be provided at the next Plan and Zone Commission meeting on May 17th when the commission will take a formal vote.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions from the commission at this time? I assume the city does not have any additional comments to make. Would anybody in the audience like to comment either in favor of or against this petition? Seeing none, we will close case REZ 22-03. Look forward to its return next month. We'll move on to ROW 22-03. Request of VSM Holdings LLC to vacate unimproved right-of-way west of Elmore Avenue and south of Pleasant Creek. Matt?
Okay, so this is the right-of-way along Elmore Avenue, north of 53rd Street, directly adjacent to that rezoning petition that we just spoke of. So the purpose of this right-of-way vacation is to facilitate the development of that abutting 7.41 acre commercial site. The vacation will enhance visibility as well as improve site access to that property. So the applicant has provided a legal description. That vacated right-of-way portion is just under half an acre of land. So just to the north of this vacated right-of-way is Pheasant Creek. The right-of-way was intentionally stopped a little bit south of that north property line. And the reason for that being is that there's a culvert that allows Pheasant Creek to flow underneath Elmore Avenue. And then the right-of-way vacation is just slightly west of the south property line, leaving the Elmore Avenue right-of-way slightly larger. And the reason for that being is that the city has long-term plans to install a pedestrian trail on that side of Elmore Avenue. So by having the right-of-way slightly larger on Elmore, it will allow that trail to fully be within the right-of-way instead of on private property within easements. The flood map on the right of the screen shows Pheasant Creek. And so a decent portion of this right-of-way is within some of the floodplain. So you're not going to be seeing structures there, but it will help facilitate access as well as signage and visibility. So again, just like before, property immediately adjacent is zoned C3, and it's shown as regional commercial on our future land use map. So staff met with the property owner at the end of February. So we really discussed the potential right-of-way vacation, the rezoning request, as well as future development of this site. So we're really just kind of packaging this together with the rezoning as well as with the right-of-way to proceed forward at one timely manner. So again, abutting property owners were sent a public notice notifying them of today's public hearing. Staff have not received any comments. And a public notice was also published in the Quad City Times. So right-of-way vacations, they're a two-step process. The first is to determine if the right-of-way is needed for any public purpose. And then the second is to negotiate and determine terms of conveyance to adjacent property owners. That's done outside of the Plan and Zone Commission. That'll be handled with the city's legal department following city council approval. So a formal staff recommendation will be provided at the May 17th Plan and Zone Commission meeting.
Thank you, Matt. Would anybody from the commission care to comment or ask questions? Seeing none, would anybody from VSM Holdings care to comment on your petition? Commissioners, any questions? Final call for staff or the petitioner? Seeing none, we will close case ROW 22-03. And I need to correct myself. I originally said it'll return next month on the first petition. I forgot that we're already in May. It will return May 17th at our next regularly scheduled meeting. That would conclude the public hearing agenda. We'll get into the regular meeting agenda. Roll call, please. Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Schneider is excused. Eichelberry? Here. Johnson?
Present.
Tallman here. Ingram?
Present.
Hepner? Here. Fransgaard?
Here.
Reinhardt?
Here.
Manus?
Here.
Carrington's excused. And Stelk? Yeah. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Report of City Council activity.
Okay, there's several items to update you on tonight. The case REZ 22-01, which is the rezoning on South Utah Avenue, has passed City Council. The right-of-way vacation request on behalf of Dollar General has moved to third consideration. the preliminary plat for Oak Brook 2021 was approved by City Council, as well as the subdivision for Splendor Estates and Russell Fry Armstrong Industrial Park Second Edition. Both those final plats have also been approved.
Thank you, Laura. Secretary's report.
Move the report.
Secretary's report has been moved and seconded as printed. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It will stay as printed. Anything with comp plan, Laura?
Yeah, I believe that we will be bringing a public hearing before you for a comprehensive plan amendment for about 200 acres at the May 17th meeting.
Thank you. I look forward to that. We'll move on to zoning activity. There's no old business. We have one new business item. Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's case REZ 22-02, request of Menard, Inc. to rezone 4.48 acre property located north of West 65th Street and east of Harrison Street from RMF Multifamily Residential District to I-1 Light Industrial District. Staff recommends case REZ 22-02 be forwarded to the City Council with a recommendation for denial, and I so move.
Case number REZ 22-02 has been moved and seconded for denial. Staff, Matt?
Okay, so the subject property is located just to the southwest of the existing Menards retail store, west of the Quick Star, so north of 65th Street, and then west of Brady Street. Adjacent to it is the Maplewood Apartments, immediately abutting. To the north is Main Street, which is a single-family residential street, and Main Street actually dead ends right at the subject property. And then to the south, you have a couple different hotels. So the request is to rezone this property from a multifamily residential district to a light industrial district. And the purpose for that is to develop the vacant, almost 4.5 acre site to an outdoor self-storage facility. And the I-1 district was chosen because that's the least intensive district where outdoor self-storage is a permitted use. The applicant has provided conceptual plans of the site. So on the right is a site plan showing outdoor storage units that would surround the perimeter of the property. You would take access from 65th Street to the south. And then in the middle, they would have additional storage units as well as what appears to be outdoor vehicle storage. And then on the left of the screen is a conceptual rendering of how that might look from the outside viewing the property. So in terms of zoning map amendments, you want to make sure that the rezoning is compatible with the surrounding area. So the property zone multifamily, which is under the same designation as the apartment complex immediately abutting to the west. And then you have single family residential to the north as well as to the south of 65th Street. The Menards and Quick Star are both zone C3, which is a general commercial district along Brady Street. And then just to the south, the hotels are under that commercial corridor designation. And then zoomed out on the right, you could see a wider scope of the surrounding area with the interstate to the north. Along the interstate and along 76th Street is where you have more of our industrial zoning district. Then as you travel down Brady Street, on the west side is more commercially zoned property. And then industrial zoning is to the east where there's an existing industrial park. So the purpose of the multifamily residential district, it's really meant to accommodate high density neighborhoods, which enable a variety of different housing types, which include single family, semi-detached, two-family, townhomes, multifamily, and buildings of that nature. The light industrial district, that's really meant for light manufacturing, fabricating, processing, distributing, and warehouse type uses. So looking at the future land use map, the Brady Street corridor is designated. It's a designated commercial corridor. And then everything to the west of the Menards in that Brady Street corridor falls under the residential general category, which is what the subject property is designated as. And then again, the map on the right shows more of that zoomed out where you see industry in purple, really focused along 76th Street and the I-80 interstate, as well as Tremont Avenue to the east of Brady Street. So before submitting an application, staff had dialogue with the applicant just to propose a couple of different options for their intended use. The first one being to consider rezoning the subject site under a commercial zoning classification. If that would be done, it would have to be a enclosed self-storage facility. So that's your climate-controlled facilities that are you enter your unit from the inside of a building, so it's all contained under one building type. However, the applicant, Menards, they own one of these climate-controlled facilities at 110 West 53rd Street. So they're already meeting that product demand in the Davenport market. So their interest is really to diversify their local inventory and go with the outdoor storage facility option. Second alternative that was brought forth by staff, Menards owns the almost 19 acres of property north of, I believe that's 67th Street, just north of the retail store. So staff would be more amenable to rezoning that piece of land to a light industrial district, given how close it is to the abutting industry to the east. However, there are some challenges with that property, including topography, as well as some infrastructure improvements that would need to be made to 67th Street. So that option was taken off the table. So when rezoning property, you want to look at the full variety of uses that are permitted within each zoning district. So the multifamily residential district, again, it really allows for duplexes, townhomes, multifamilies, apartments, condos. It does allow for other compatible uses that aren't necessarily residential, but still work well with a residential neighborhood. So that's just being your bed and breakfast, a community center, daycare, group home, meeting hall, some neighborhood commercial establishment, churches would fall underneath that RMF zoning district. So rezoning to I-1, that's really meant for your manufacturing, your fabricating, processing, distribution and warehouse type uses. So rezoning, you're not just rezoning to self-storage, you're rezoning to all the uses that are allowed within that district. The I-1 district can lead to more noise, traffic, light, or other nuisances that may impact the immediately surrounding residential neighborhood. Another factor to consider when rezoning are design standards that are outlined within the city's zoning ordinance. So residential design standards regulate the architectural form and dimensional elements. So that's having, roof pitches with gables, it's having balconies, it's having articulation within a facade. We also require higher quality building materials on residential structures. Our code encourages masonry and brick type of building materials as well as decorative siding. There's also a transparency requirement that requires 25% of a building facing a public street to have some type of window or glass. And really that's done in a way to ensure that the development's compatible with the surrounding residential neighborhood. So to compare that with our industrial standards, these are really meant to promote larger scale manufacturing and warehouse type uses. So buildings that might be, within the tens to hundreds of thousands of square feet. So for those reasons, there's lower quality building standards and building materials. So you could use, for instance, like a metal panel or corrugated siding on an industrial building. There's no architectural design features that are regulated in the I-1 district. There's also no transparency requirements. You could have a building without a single window on it. And our industrial districts also allow for barbed wire fences, which wouldn't be allowed in a residential district. So public input, again, property owners within 200 feet were sent a public notice of the April 19th public hearing. We had one abutting property owner that lives on Main Street speak at that meeting. Their comment was pertaining more towards the continuation of Main Street. They didn't want to see that become a through street. Public hearing notice was also published in the Quad City Times. And to date, staff have received one written comment opposed to the rezoning petition. So with that, staff is recommending denial. So the findings are, one, that the proposed rezoning to a light industrial district is inconsistent with the comp plan and adopted land use policies, which identify the site as residential general. And amending the property to an industrial zoning district would be considered spot zoning in this case. Two, the petition is not compatible with the zoning and land uses of nearby property. The rezoning request is not compatible with the established neighborhood character, which includes single-family, multifamily, as well as commercial. The proposed amendment may be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare of the city. And then finally, rezoning to I-1 will not create any nonconformities.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners, any questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, would the petitioner like to step forward?
Again, I'm sorry this has to be a controversial project. I'm sorry it has to be an industrial zoning request. We're putting you in a hard spot. We're in a hard spot. We have been trying to develop this property for a long time with no success. In fact, there's been a lot of multifamily property developed in other parts of town, even down the road from us, but not on this one. We are not trying to create an industrial property or an industrial complex or zoning districts by any means. In fact, we want to develop this for Menards. I don't think anyone has any complaints about Menards being where they are, how they operate, how it looks, how it's maintained. That's really what we're trying to do here with just a different type of use. You know, I've been to probably almost 1,000 public hearings in my life. I can count on one hand the number of neighbors that have showed up in support of something we're doing or anything. That just doesn't happen. I'm sure you guys see that too, right? Everyone comes up and crabs at you and complains. We actually had that for this project, which is surprising and refreshing. So I can't say this particular proposal would be detrimental to the neighborhood if the neighbors like it. They live next to where we're going to operate. They know what we're going to do, and they're going to be the ones that look at it. So I think that's a real positive. Our intent for storage is simply because residential hasn't worked and it won't work. It costs more than ever to build residential properties. I'm sure you guys have heard that or seen that. If you put apartments on this, no one's going to rent a $1,200 a month brand new apartment when it looks in the dirt parking area and dumpsters of the adjacent apartment complex. I drove by the Motel 6 today. There was no less than 4 cars jacked up without their tires. No one's going to pay a bunch of money to develop residential on this particular lot. So we want to invest our money in a lot we know that we're going to continue to own, create a new business. We're not just the professional grass mowers of this intersection anymore, for a new building. And I think it is good for the neighbors in this particular, say, traffic light and road, because there's not going to be a signal or stop sign on this entrance. If you develop this as a residential, it has to have 2 access points, which means there's only one that can go in front of it because it's so narrow. That means it has to connect to the neighborhood in the back. That means 67th Street has to be improved. That's almost $1 million in road improvements. Who can do that to build apartments? It's just impossible. So like I said, I hate that we have to request a zoning to industrial. But as someone or a business that's gonna be here forever, you know, you really have our assurance that we're gonna maintain it. Menards wants to own this. It's not gonna be a meat rendering plant or some other weird industrial property. You know, it's gonna be storage. And then I don't wanna flip through all the different nuances of all this, but that was really just my pitch. You know, Menards wants to do something on the property. It quite literally can't be developed into residential. No one should want it to be developed into commercial. You know, oh my God, what if there was a bank there and there's 1,000 cars a day coming out on that road, or a gas station? That's bad for the neighbors too. This is a low impact, low roof, low light, low traffic use next to the neighbors. Quite honestly, I think it'll work well. There's a lot of transitional housing around this neighborhood. A lot of those folks need storage. Like if you think back to when you moved in and out of apartments, you needed that. Imagine that being in your neighborhood as you come in and out. That's a benefit. Not to mention I think we talked about it last time, the contractors and plumbers and HVAC guys that shop at Menards that use these facilities. You know, I have no doubt this will be full, it'll be functioning, in the end, it'll be good. And I think that's my pitch. Of course, if you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to hear them.
Well, I've got a couple comments. I don't appreciate your comments about the neighboring residential area, the neighboring businesses. We have no way of knowing if there's 4 cars jacked up on jack stands across the street. That's not germane really to this discussion. You know, the residents that live to the west, while that might not live up to your level of standard for homes, that's our home. They don't own those, they rent those, and it's up to the building owner to maintain those. So to make the derogatory remark you made at our first meeting, I don't think anybody here appreciates that, because that's their home, you know? If I remember correctly, and I know that Commissioner Tallman and myself was on this commission back when Menards came to us wanting to rezone that tree farm and landscaping business into your facility and lay down acres of concrete or asphalt and build a new building. There was a lot of contention, and a lot of it came from the neighbors. Some of it came from the businesses like UPS and some of the other businesses that had to use that frontage road, not thinking that that was going to work for them. But we did a lot of negotiating back then, whatever it was, 8 years ago. And one of the pieces that was critical to satisfy the neighborhood was to build that 4.8 or whatever it is acre buffer, is about all I can refer to it as. And the reason it was zoned residential multifamily, because that's what it was to the west. And the neighbors understood that they would back away from their objection as long as they had that agreement. I would have a hard time, while I'm not a voter on this project, unless there's a tie, I would have a hard time going along without having those neighbors' input that were there when we negotiated now. I mean, we made an agreement, and that's what the agreement stood for. Now to change that, I have to say, I have to agree with staff's recommendation. I'm sorry that it puts Menards in a position, but at the same time, there was an agreement made years ago. I will now open this up to questions from the commission. Commissioner Eichelberry.
I have a question that's actually for staff. Thanks for coming again. Is this the only green space area that is proximate to this neighborhood?
Technically, yes. There is some open space zoned land further north. However, that's an old landfill. It's not really designed as an open space for that area. And there is some open space along the creek as well. but not within the immediate vicinity.
Thanks.
Any additional questions from commission? Any additional comments from Tyler?
What, I appreciate what you said, and I want to state on record, my intent was not to talk bad about the neighbors. At least their homes. You know, I understand their landlord is not taking care of it the way we would like, and people have to have a place to live. I guess my intent was, as the owner, we want to see development from someone putting money into that, and we hear the same thing time and time again. So again, I apologize if that came off wrong. That wasn't my intent. That was simply what we hear on why it hasn't developed and what led us to this path. As for the owner, I understand that when Menards was built, there was controversy. We had to put up buffers and screens and a lot of different things. A lot of time has passed, and we actually have neighbors in support of us and this particular project now, which I think is something we didn't have the last time. So I guess I would just end with, we actually have support for this from the neighbors. And they spoke and they're here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak in favor of this petition? Please step forward. Please identify yourself and say where you live.
My name is Danielle Mull. My husband and I are here, and our neighbor Ferris is also here. We live on North Main Street, 2 houses in from the end of the dead-end street. And again, we do not want a through street. We bought that property 2 years ago, right before COVID, with the anticipation it's quiet, nobody's gonna come back there. We have a fenced-in backyard, everything works great. There is some unfavorable traffic that comes from the hotel and so forth. So we feel that if we put that building there, that'll put up a buffer. We don't have to see all the bright shiny lights from Quick Star or the hotels, and we barely notice Menards. They have a few night lights, that's about it. This one is all lighting underneath. We won't have to see anything. It'll shield all of that activity and multiple police cars and ambulances that visit the hotels for us and continue to keep our neighborhood quiet and able to have something there because we don't want a through street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else like to speak in favor of? Seeing none, anybody who would wish to speak in opposition to, please step forward. Again, seeing none. Commissioners, final questions. Laura?
I just wanted to make a point of clarification that there was a comment that the street would connect if this was to develop as residential. That's not necessarily the case. We take a look at that development on a case-by-case basis. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification.
Thanks, I appreciate it, Laura. Commissioners, final call for questions. Seeing none, we will move to a roll call, but I want to caution everybody, a yes vote is for staff's recommendation for denial. Commissioner Tallman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hepner,
Yes.
Bransgard,
Yes.
Reinhardt,
Yes.
Manus,
Yes.
Stelk, Eichelberry,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Tallman, yes. Motion carries, Mr. Chairman, and that concludes his report.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Subdivision activity, we have no old or new business. Future business, Laura?
Oh, so it'd just be the 2 public hearing cases next week, next cycle, as well as the public hearing for the comprehensive plan amendment.
And possibly
Bylaws.
bylaws? Thank you. Any additional communications or other business? Anybody? Anybody in the audience like to speak? Commissioner Hefner? I'm sorry, I was jumping the gun there. Okay. Anybody in the audience? Seeing none? Now Commissioner Hefner.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for your attendance. I appreciate it.